December 7th, 2015 Raymore City Council work session. We have a few items on the agenda tonight, beginning with the strategic planning process. Item A. Toss it over to you.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to introduce again to everyone Mr. Jonathan Morris from the University of Kansas Public Management Center. He will be the primary on our strategic planning initiative, and he is here tonight to essentially kick off by handling administrative matters that will be associated with the strategic plan and asking the council for some dates. We might have some, from the list that we put in front of you, we might have some recommended dates that might work out better for everybody, but I'll let him go ahead with that.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you to everyone. It's nice to see you all again, and I'm very excited to be here. So tonight we formally launch our process to begin the strategic planning initiative. And as Jim mentioned, tonight is primarily some administrative tasks to help lay the groundwork for the work that we have ahead over the next several weeks. You have two pages in front of you that I want to call your attention to. And on behalf of my colleague, Laura Howard, who's our director, and all of our staff, I just first of all want to thank you for the opportunity to work with you. And we have contracted with you as a resource and as an asset to you to facilitate the strategic planning initiative. And the documents you have in front of you, one is a listing of the themes that you identified with Dr. John Nalbandian at the kind of mini retreat that was held here several weeks ago. And I'll speak to this in a little bit more direct fashion here shortly. And the other document that you have is a draft timeline with some a basic framework for the events that we will engage in together through the strategic planning process, and then a list of optional dates that we need to select from so that we can identify and then begin planning the times and the commitments of over the next several weeks. So to begin with, I'll give you just a very short overview of the game plan. And essentially, the strategic planning initiative is conceived of three phases. And this initial phase, in the plenary phase, is to solidify the themes that you've identified as council through your own efforts, and then begin to lay the groundwork for the conversations and how we'll engage council, staff, and the community over the next several weeks. The second phase will consist of a series of dialogues with the community in a town hall meeting format, which I'll describe in more detail. And then the third phase is really summary comments and what we plan to do with all of the work that we do to identify strategic initiatives. So as you see here on the draft timeline, we're doing our quick kickoff here tonight, and I'll just be with you for a few minutes as we identify some of this and answer any preliminary questions you have. The second item listed there is a City Council work session. So we've dedicated the meeting on the 21st to get into some of the heavy lifting, and we're going to dive into the themes. And so the other sheet that you have in front of you has the themes that you identified with Dr. Nalbandian, and I have some homework, if you will, for you to do between now and then. And what I'd ask you to do is to revisit your notes and this sheet here from the first conversation we had. And I'd like for you to give some thought to how well this captures your thinking related to these themes, to expand on them as you see fit. And ultimately, what we look to produce is a set of themes that we'll put in front of the community that will frame our town hall meetings, our community conversations. So we want to imprint that discussion with your ideas that originate from these themes. So over the next couple of weeks, I'd like for you to look at these, to reflect on them, think about, does this capture your ideas for the primary drivers, if you will, for the community? And if you wish to expand on your thoughts there on the 21st, we will look to solidify the language and come to some consensus on final language, and then that's what we'll put forward as part of the strategic planning initiative. The third listing on the timeline is I will be meeting with Jim and with his staff to begin to look at both logistics and some of the framing of how we'll go about the strategic planning initiative, to get their inputs and some of the mechanics of that. And we've tentatively scheduled, I believe we have these dates, the 9th and the 22nd, that we'll be looking at for time to hammer out some of the details of this. In late December or sometime in early January, and this will be determined based on our conversations on the 21st and then on the 22nd, we'll want to set up a series of focus group conversations. And what we look to accomplish here is to get some feedback from key stakeholders that you've identified as council that you would see as instrumental in informing our process. And the focus group is simply, the purpose is a small group of people to get some inputs on ideas and themes, as well as their perspectives on best ways to engage the broader public. And so we've tasked you with and asked you to be thinking about 5 individuals that you would like to invite into this process that you see as having a range of ideas and perspectives on this process in general. And our hope is, if you continue down the list, then we'll have a prep day in there, a work day to kind of pull things together. But ultimately, this is building towards a large town hall meeting. Now, the town hall meeting itself, we'll talk here about locations for that, but we hope to have a good-sized turnout, over 100 people if we can, and depending on your ideas and inputs, we'll refine that number as we go. But the structure of the town hall meeting will be, we will facilitate a conversation, and it won't be your typical just everybody sitting in the room and talking one at a time or multiple people at a time, but we've got an actual process to do this. And as part of that process, we'll employ some new technologies, and we'll use what's called 21st century town hall technologies. And it will consist of a room set up with a series of round tables. There will be a facilitator at each table, and we'll facilitate discussion from the front of the room, but we'll actually be using technology to support our efforts. And at each round table, we'll have an iPad and a server on site that will allow us to facilitate small conversations at tables, have the community's ideas input into the iPad, and all of it uploads into an on-site server. And then we process the ideas that's coming from each of the participants and then identify common themes that are coming from the community. And then in a matter of minutes, we can repopulate that and then project it up into a PowerPoint for the full room to see. In addition to that, we'll also have what are called iClickers, which are like look like little remote controls that allow you to do multi-voting in real time right then and there. And so we'll have the opportunity to hear from everybody in the community who participates to give their ideas, have it populated into the transcript, if you will, of the conversation. We'll theme that, and then we'll throw it up on the screen, and we'll do some voting from there. So it's a very efficient process. It's a very fun process. And one of the things that I hope for is that we produce good results, but it also is a process that you can feel good about and also find enjoyment in tackling these big questions for the community. So the technology is kind of a unique way to engage that. And it also provides us then a written transcript of our conversations as we go. So the follow-up to the town hall meetings, we will have, and based upon your input and our ongoing discussions, we'll likely have 2 follow-up meetings that will again engage the public. And we look to have an iterative process where it builds on the success of the first. So as we have the big town hall meetings and identify some big themes, the follow-up will drill into more specifics from those meetings. So They may take the form of one or two themes, and we dive in, kind of do a deeper dive on that first follow-up meeting. And then the second follow-up meeting could either take a different theme that we want to do a deeper dive, or we might flesh out in greater detail what we identified in the first follow-up meeting. So we want to structure the time, and most importantly tonight, we want to establish the dates so that we have it on the calendar and we know what we're working towards, and that creates a timeline for us. Upon the completion of the second follow-up meeting, then our role as facilitators will be to engage you all in some summary conversations and do ultimately a summary write-up. And the ultimate deliverable then is a summary report that you as council can take and then begin to take action on as you see fit and as based upon the feedback that you get, so that you've had the opportunity to identify original themes, collect significant feedback from the community on those themes, begin to do some prioritization within that, and then ultimately lay the groundwork for some kind of strategic plan going forward. And so we'll help facilitate that process throughout. In addition to the dates listed, my expectation and our hope would be that we could do our conversations as council and then conversations with staff over the next few weeks in December and into early January, get the official dates for the community out to the public as soon as we can, and then we'll begin to give you some language that you can attach to that, so people understand what they're signing up for, so to speak, and have some ideas coming in and give it some thought before they arrive as well. And then by the time we hit late January or the 1st of February, we really want to roll with the public events. And what we envision is maybe do the big town hall meeting, then in a couple of weeks follow up with the next thematic meeting, and then within a week and a half, 2 weeks, come in with the third meeting. But it's important to be able to capitalize on the momentum. We want to be able to show that we're making progress, that we're making good use of the community's inputs. And so we don't want to design a process and want to try and avoid a process that it drags on forever and you lose momentum and you lose ideas between each gathering. So ideally, if we could get those 3 public meetings within about a month's time, that would be kind of an optimal framework. But it depends on your ideas and then, of course, just the availability and working out the dates. So with that, and on the 21st, I'll provide more detail on kind of the mechanics of this and some of the structure, and I'll have some ideas for you to be responding to. But my hope right now is to answer any kind of initial questions that you might have, and then get to dates and having you look at calendars and identify, if we can, our official dates for the process.
Thank you. I have a quick question.
Yes.
Thinking about this, are you envisioning that the 3 town hall meetings would, for the most part, be attended by the same people or by different groups of people? Yeah,
that's a great question. So it's been my experience doing any number of strategic planning initiatives that we tend to have a lot of interest and kind of the greatest input at the first session. And then you'll have some people who feel that they've been able to give their input and they feel that that's been a productive use of their time, and then they may or may not contribute in some way going forward, and it's often the case that we won't see them again at one of the follow-up events. You'll have other individuals who are excited and energized by it and really want to commit, and they'll be at each one of them. So to answer your question, I would anticipate that there would be some of the same people at all 3 events. It's quite probable that we'll see a lot at the first and then a drop-off at each of the subsequent 2. And then depending upon how we structure those follow-ups, if they're theme-based, then some people might elect to come to the second meeting because we're looking at a specific theme that they're passionate about and have have a vested interest in. But the third one is of a different theme, and they're not as interested, so we wouldn't see them necessarily.
Okay, so I just wondered, as I'm talking to people, do I need to be talking to them about it's a 3-meeting commitment or a come if you can? Same thing with the focus groups. Is that going to be a one-time commitment? Is that going to be multiple times that we would meet with the focus group?
Yeah, so the focus group will be just a smaller group of people, and what I'll need is your guidance and direction on what's kind of an optimal arrangement for that. And on the 21st, I'll give some options to consider in terms of not who would be on it, but the types of roles that might play on a focus group. But typically that would only meet once and possibly twice at most. Yes.
I got a question about the focus group. 5 people, we have 4 wards, so would that be one person from each ward? How are you wanting to structure that?
Okay, yeah, let me tease apart one thing here. So part of what we're thinking in terms of the 5 people is also in terms of the town hall meeting. Like we want to have a good, strong turnout for that. In terms of the focus group, we'll have to look at some of the mechanics of that, and I'm open to different ideas on that. What I'd like to accomplish through that is just a broad representative sampling of the community, however we might define that, but not just your typical people that you see that are most active in economic development or significant policy conversations now, but I want you to think broadly and creatively about who are people who have a strong vested interest in the city's future, but who we don't necessarily reach out to on an active basis, or they may not feel that they've been included in ways that they could be. And so I want you to think broadly in that regard.
Jonathan, perhaps if they have their 5 people, maybe identify one of their 5 who they think would be really good for that type of focus group application.
Yeah,
So we end up with 9 people for the focus group.
Sure, that would be helpful. One of the key things with focus groups is it needs to be small, because you want to differentiate between the large scale meeting, and the focus group is really testing some ideas. So what I'll do with that is throw some ideas out and see. And part of, for example, one thing that I'd like to run by the focus group is messaging around how to get people excited and wanting to come to the event. And so we'll talk about some language and what are the best ways to outreach accordingly. And so that tends to be a more efficient use of time if it's not too large of a group of people. And also, if someone is very, very actively wanting to be involved, we have the 3 major events. So even if the focus group doesn't make sense or they're looking for another way to connect, they'll have that as well to give input. The focus group is just to vet some initial ideas on how we might proceed on the logistics and also the messaging of it.
Mr. Mayor, and I feel very strongly that the Planning Commission should be involved in this, and I don't see where they have any focus groups or they would be considered as part of the 5 people or not. But they are charged with planning and zoning of our city, especially the planning part of it. So to me, that means they should definitely be a part of it, not just as a citizen, but also as the committee. And I don't know whether that comes under department head work sessions or not, probably not. But I do think that they should be involved, actively involved.
Okay, thank you. That there are a number of ways that we could formally plug them into the process, and I didn't spell out which committees, or I just listed staff and council on here in the focus group broadly defined. But there's a couple of ways we could do that. One, we could make sure that the focus group itself has a dedicated representative from the Planning Commission, and in any case, the Planning Commission will be one of the active groups that we're reaching out to for the process in general and each of the town hall meetings.
As to dates, when Jonathan and I were kicking around some of the many options that are in front of the council, one of the things we were very cognizant of is council time, obviously, because you all will be the most active in the process. So we were kind of thinking that if we could focus the public input meeting portion of this, the three in the center here, and advertise them for the month of February, and keep it all within the month of February when we're trying to advertise the campaign, if you will, out there that you all are going for. Get involved in February. So we would start on a Monday night, which would be a normal work session meeting night on February 1st. Perhaps recommend that to get involvement in the second meeting, shift to a different night, perhaps Wednesday, February 17th, and then come back on the 5th Monday of the month, which would be open, on Monday, February 29th. So we've kind of bookended the month, if you will, with those three meeting dates. We just wanted to throw that out as a first option for the council as you check your calendars. Of course, two of those nights, I'm sure you all would probably be available. It's the Wednesday night that's up in the air.
Mr. Mayor, the only concern I've had on all of this is I'm still kind of back up on the dates for the focus group and the prep day. I mean, my fear is just trying to get community involvement in late December, pretty much December 21st. That's the week of Christmas. I think we have a lot of lost interest at that point, pretty much the last 10 days of the month. And so my fears are our focus group's not really going to meet till early January. So I just want to make sure we're leaving enough time. Prep day on January 12th means we only have a little more than a week of business days to utilize. So I just, I want to make sure we have enough time. So I like the February idea for the meetings. I just want to make sure our focus group has enough time.
Okay.
We have a lot of bad weather in February. We have some alternate days that we can go then. If we get a lot of snow or ice or sleet, then you're going to cut down to the number of people that can come.
The concern would be that, again, we would lose a lot of momentum if we put it off till March worrying about snow and sleet. And then you're also into election campaign cycles and going into a new goals year. We'd kind of like to have all of these set in place prior to the April 1st new goals year.
I saw where you had Monday, February the 15th might be available, rather than on a Wednesday, the 17th.
You'll note that we have a lot of work session items, it seems like. In this cycle, we've been hitting it. Tonight's a perfect example of it. And to be quite honest with you, I was kind of thinking about if you had it on the night of the 15th, perhaps calling you in on that holiday night as well, just to have a regular work session to get some things cracked out. It would be the only regular work session during February, and even then I'd be asking you all to come in on a holiday. I believe it's President's Day, sir.
Thank you. I think this all looks good. Kind of the age-old Wednesday thing is church. So I might recommend looking at Tuesday the 16th instead of the 17th if we're afraid maybe church services or things like that might affect our Wednesday nights.
Mr. Mayor, I would agree with that too. I was thinking Tuesday and Thursday night myself, but I like what staff says, knocking this out in the month of February.
Tuesday, February 16th. So we are looking at Monday, February 1st, Tuesday, February 16th, and Monday, February 29th. And we will definitely, as soon as we get focus group names from you all on the 21st, in recognition of the fact, I think Councilmember Moorhead's probably correct. It's going to be really tough to get somebody after the 21st in that next week between Christmas and New Year's. So we'll probably be looking at trying to get that done as early in January as possible.
Just a quick question to clarify. So do you want one name or 5 names?
Jonathan told me first that we want 5, and I came up with the idea that maybe of the 5 each of you give us, maybe pick the one who might be the most enthusiastic about meeting in the focus group format and helping us kind of plan the rest of the events. And now that we have the dates, we're probably going to be looking at one of 2 locations to hold this many people, either the upstairs over at Community Bank of Raymore or Holmes Hall.
So just to provide some way to think about who you might select for that, your list of 5, and actually I hope that list grows, but as you think about people that you're going to want to invite to the town hall meeting, there certainly those 5 included. But if you're thinking specifically of one of those 5 for the focus group, I would encourage you to give thought to someone who is a good resource and might engage well in conversations about process, design, kind of good at engaging in conversations about feedback on how others might best respond to our outreach efforts and things like that. But somebody who is as equally committed to their own ideas and interests as they are to helping inform a process. And so if that's helpful in any way, then I would encourage you to consider that criteria. And then as we begin to compile names, one of the things that I'll be looking for is a sampling of different parts of the community, if you will, both geographically, but also in terms of occupational interests and things like that, so that the focus group is not just a collection of similar people from similar backgrounds, but there's a diversity within that group in terms of their perspectives from the community. So as we begin to look at names, we can flesh that out collectively of what makes for a good focus group. Or if we end up needing to do 2 smaller focus groups to either accommodate the people and the number of people, but also scheduling wise, and we're very happy to do that as well.
I'm a little confused. There's going to be the 8 of us, the council members. There's going to be 5 of the focus. Is that all that's going to be actually involved in this, coming and meeting together?
No. The focus group will just be an initial conversation to help us plan out the main events. But the February 1st event, the town hall meeting, is open to the entire community. So we hope to have, well, it'll be up to us in terms of how well we do in terms of our outreach and how each of you engage in inviting people. But my hope is, at the very minimum, we'd have at least 100 people, if not 200, in attendance at that. Okay, so we have the dates of February 1st, Monday, February 1st, Tuesday, February 16th, and Monday, February 29th. Does anyone else have any questions for me this evening? All right, well, I look forward very much to diving in on this with you and working with you in detail on December 21st. So thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you, Jonathan, very much. The next item on the agenda tonight is the City Hall Annex discussion. We have Draw Architecture here. They heard what the City Council had to say at their first meeting with you all and are ready to make presentation number 2.
Dan McGinn with Draw. Ooh, hey, Dan McGinn with Draw Architecture and Brett Payton with Plaid Collaborative. Just wanted to give you an update on progress. Haven't seen each other since before Thanksgiving. So, my clicker. So, first slide. We know the site. Just wanted to remind everyone and kind of let you know that these imperatives that we talked about last time, which were the result of a lot of conversation and listening, are really important to us, and it's something we talk about every time we meet to discuss design on the project. Being flexible, being bold in what we do, really focusing on gathering people together and connecting them to each other. I think it's really important that this table is leaving a legacy, and we take that very seriously. We want to pay attention to what makes Raymore different from other communities and focus in on that authenticity to create something that is just an irresistible place, someplace that the community is really proud of, and that ties into supporting Raymore's identity as a thriving community. Program hasn't really changed since our last discussion. A lobby with a multi-purpose community room, divisible for 150 people. I'll show you 2 schemes tonight, a baseline scheme that's for about 150 people, and then a scheme we talked about was with more enhanced features. And we'll show you both kind of a building scheme diagram and some site diagrams. So the program also has flexible meeting space, office space, a kitchen, gallery, restrooms, storage rooms, and then the building's connection to the exterior we think is extremely important. So we've been working from day one thinking about patios and green spaces as being as important gathering spaces as the interior spaces. Our last meeting, we really appreciated the feedback, quite a number of directives, but here are 6 that kind of rose to the top. We liked the comments of needing to respond to the angled site better. If the building diagram that people responded to most strongly was one we had called the splay, where there were sort of administrative spaces and community spaces sort of separated by a lobby, and we had it splayed, but it was pointed out that more of a increased splay would help take better advantage of the site and would also better address Broadmoor. Last time you saw me, we were just looking at an orange diagram on a green piece of a drawing that showed lawn. So we've actually taken the time to really try to fit the program into the diagram. And again, very early on in the process, and we want to hear your thoughts on this, but I'll show you a plan diagram that looks like a plan with doors and restrooms shown, and I'm really looking forward to feedback from you all. We really heard how important it is, obviously, to be cost effective and to really focus in on trying to be as flexible as possible with different uses. And it's always a challenge, but something we take very seriously, of not letting scope creep happen as the project moves forward, really focusing in on being good stewards of your money and trying to keep square footage tight, and that directly affects cost. We know that the public's involved in understanding this project, and so being very specific about terminology might be problematic. So We heard to stay more general in terminology and talk about meeting spaces rather than classrooms, for instance. We got good feedback on the site design, and as Brett will show you, we heard that you were interested in creating a multiple of different types of exterior zones to create a diversity of experience on the exterior. And the site is big enough to do that, which is a really unique feature of this site. And then finally, to focus on creating generous public spaces and to think about older users as well as younger users as well as everyone in between, and making sure that there is the building is designed for everyone. And Brett's going to talk just for a second about the merging the site concepts, and I'll be back.
Thanks, Dan. Excuse me. This image looks at the two previous site plans. There was actually 3 last time we met, but this looks at 2 specifically that were well received, and we got comments from both options. And one of the challenges is combining, different benefits from different designs and options. So, the upper left image shows the building footprint that everyone seemed to gravitate toward. The site plan below that, there were some design opportunities within the site that were well received as well. So this, as we move forward through the design process, it's combining, things that everyone likes, seems to gravitate toward, and coming up with one cohesive option. And you'll see some study sketches to the right and some internal notes for us to discuss, but really we wanted to combine a central green space. We wanted to form different types of spaces with vegetation and landforms, and as a further kind of enhanced option to connect these spaces with a trail system and potential sculpture.
And let's see. So I'm hoping this is going to be a pointer and not just shut the entire building down. So I'm going to, there we go. So do you all remember this kind of scheme where we were calling it display, and then what I was mentioning was that we're going to display it a little bit more. So you're going to see 2 schemes now. One of them is the baseline scheme, which is with the community space sized for 150 people. You'll see that will be surrounded by a very basic sort of lawn, just kind of a baseline design. And then the second scheme enlarges the floor plan to handle up to 300 people, and that has the more enhanced site features too. So just want to give you some context. So here is the baseline design, and just, we're very early in the process. The thing about architecture nowadays is whatever you draw, it looks immediately like you're ready to go build it. So you see straight lines that are walls and doors and everything. Again, this is just to help you kind of understand the thought process where we are. So, so this diagram right there on the site is this building. And you can kind of see thinking about different ways to enter the building, both from the street, from the parking, into this main kind of lobby space there, and then also kind of a staff entrance that could go right into that area. This is what I was last time calling the sort of more administrative. This is, let's see, if you can imagine this rectangle as being taller than this part. This really only needs to be kind of a lower ceiling height, with this kind of needing a little bit bigger volume just because of the nature of a larger gathering. So you can kind of see coming in the main kind of entrance area, kind of opening out onto a nice view. This is the Parks and Rec work area here, restroom block, meeting space. That's kind of sized right now as a larger scale meeting space. And we can also talk about maybe that turning into kind of a medium and a small, depending on some of your feedback. This is the main community space. These things right there are what you have in this room little niches where the sliding partition would go. Wherever you put this sliding partition, maybe we can use it. Is it stored somewhere? We can. But anyway, that's depending on the nature of the day. You could have, for instance, up to 4 meetings very easily here. So if you closed this is 1 meeting in here. This is 1 meeting in here. You could also have a meeting in there. And then for just general informal gathering, you could also, the lobby is big enough to have a small meeting of 4 or 5, 6 people there. So there are little niches to kind of like have smaller breakout meetings as well. This central form here is, you can't really read it unfortunately, but that says serve, and we're thinking that is just kind of an anchor space that functions as a kitchen, but also as a reception area when the function requires it. So there might be someone there depending on programming and funds to greet people as they come in. There, as we understand it, also the Parks and Rec has numerous days where maybe a couple hundred people might come to register, a couple hundred kids might come to register for baseball, for instance. So there could be some interaction between that happening there. And we've had continuing discussions on, really drilling down on getting that right. But this is just one idea of that. And Brett can maybe just talk about how this is sort of
as Dan mentioned already, is that the site plan to the left with this smaller footprint is our base option. And just to refresh your memory, we're doing 30 parking spaces, and those stretch along Broadmoor. We'll have wide sidewalks to access the building. We'll have a limited amount of grading, just simply grading to build the building, sort of just a pad level grading opportunity. And then as far as plantings, we're still kind of working through what that could be, but there will be some ornamental trees and possibly some shade trees. And we're still, working on how the best spot is for for shade and things like that for people to relax on the patio, both front and back.
So as far as the circles go, just regular, whoopsie there. Just regular sort of trees. These are actually existing. Street trees. Crunch berries here are more decorative trees. And enhanced version, this is large enough meeting space for 300. You can see everything just gets a little bit bigger to handle the scale. Restrooms get a little bit bigger, lobby space gets a little bit bigger, similar kind of serve function there. One thing that as we move forward we really want to work on is making sure that if you did have an event where someone kind of rented out the entire building for a 300-person reception for a wedding, that it really functioned like its competition would. Like if we want this place to just be, when you're having a wedding reception here, everything feels right. It's not going to be luxurious like having it at the Intercontinental or something, but it would be a really great place to have a wedding reception, and we would think through kind of the operation to the point where spaces are scaled appropriately. And yeah.
The one space across from the kitchen, just right there, what is that again?
Storage, okay. And there's a storage janitor. We're hoping mechanical can happen on more of a mezzanine level up here. And so aside from the building just getting a little bit larger, obviously the big change here is the site getting more in depth.
I have a question about it. Where, and I'm not hearing too well from this, where is the kitchen in all of this?
in both of them, the kitchen
Right
is,
into there. So the one down here below this meeting space is gonna have to go through that other meeting space in order to get to the kitchen. They're not gonna have any privacy for it. So another thing that this building will be used for will be elections. And I was trying to figure out 1 or 2 polling places, how you would do them in there and still have, both of them have access to the restrooms and have access to the kitchen without having to go through another, business, another meeting room. That they should all go into that rather than having to intermingle. Because you don't know, we've had times when we couldn't have the planning commission meet because there was a meeting downstairs from somebody for the election. And so I keep that in mind, that we've got to have it where the election, people coming in from the elections are not bothered by anybody else.
I have a question about the kitchen design as well. It's a little difficult for me to tell from the bird's eye view on top. But, so is that an enclosed, basically building within the building, or is it open on the far side? Do those represent walls that go all the way to the top? It looks like it does on the 3 sides, but I'm not sure how to read this.
we're just really thinking, again, this is where architecture looks like we're ready to build this. It's mostly just a diagram showing that we think that they're a part of, like if it's a dark gray wall, we're thinking that definitely is all the way enclosed, obviously like storage, but that this could be partially open, that depending on the function of the kitchen that everyone decides on, coming in and seeing a multi-use space here that could serve as kind of a kitchen as well as reception. So a lot of what I'd really like to hear from you all would be usage of that space, and if each room needs its own sort of area to stage, put donuts, coffee, and that kind of thing.
I'm not hard on it, but I was envisioning more of a standard kitchen, basically tucked away for the specific function of preparing and serving food and it being taken from there out to an open area. I said, I'm not absolute hardcore on that, but that's more, this is a little bit, to me, this would potentially interfere with some uses. It might work for some, and others it's going to seem a little odd to me, especially if that's an open space at all.
Well, we've looked at the kitchen function in a number of areas. We looked at it here as well. One of the reasons we did put it up there was if you did have a large reception and this was a pre-function area, that it could also serve the pre-function area and not have to kind of go back and forth. So that's definitely, we're early in the process, and we could come back with.
Out there in the corner behind that exhibit storage would seem to be more. Now, I'm not an architect. You guys are. That would seem to be a more functionary. It's got access, obviously, or could have access to both of the 2 meeting spaces, the larger one and the smaller one back to the top of the diagram.
Via
Side, if you had maybe a window or counter type situation that could be shuttered and close it with one. Just that's, I think that was kind of Charlene's thought too when she brought that up. She was kind of curious to. That's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Kind of what I see going on there is similar to what we have over here with our codes and stuff. It's kind of a roll up type, but I also have the concerns there that we're wanting dual purpose there, for use of staff when they have high traffic events and stuff like that. Well, if it's set up for a kitchen, I think it would be difficult or a lot of obstacles there. That would be my concern. Again, I'm not an architect either, and I've seen some really innovative ways of them using spaces and stuff like that. But that would be my concern. As far as a kitchen there being functional, I think it could work, but I would again just caution against if we're planning on using that for dual purposes. It takes some real good creativity, I think, in my mind to get that to work.
So is what I'm hearing that thinking of the kitchen as a gleaming, shiny teaching kitchen might not be exactly what this would make most sense, in that it's a little bit more of a back of the house kind of feeling, where the registration might still happen here in a smaller iteration.
Yes.
see that kind of like a reception area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You might still have
Yes.
coffee.
Yeah.
You
yes.
could, if you wanted to encourage people to gather in the lobby and everything, you could still have a coffee function.
Yes,
But as far as like plating,
Your stove and all that back.
Yeah, I mean, from a catering standpoint, to bring in, organize, prepare, and plate food in what is out to the atrium, the walkway, that main section between the two doors is going to be more casual anyway. That would be very awkward to do that kind of out in the lobby. That'd be like us preparing food and preparing it on this front counter as people walk in. It seems like reception, yes, but not the food
So,
preparation and
just
delivery.
so we're hearing. So, just any discussions that we have that help me better understand the kind of kitchen activities would be good. So we're sort of envisioning a catering kitchen and not someone chopping garlic and that kind of thing. Does that sound kind of what we're talking about? But even then, the fog of war during a pre-function where you're plating and it's just, you don't necessarily, I can see your points. And if you did have, it's sort of like, if it was here, which seems to make sense because we don't necessarily need a lot of light in this area, directly serves this as a single space. It serves this obviously as a combined space. It can serve that kind of well. And maybe the only negative would be, and there might not be a fix to this just because of life on Earth and you can't do everything, but someone might have to go this way if there was one function here, separate function there. But what are the likelihood throughout the year that you would have two kitchen-heavy events at the same time? And you could tell me that would happen 25 times a year and you better pay attention to it? Or is it once in a while, but so the pros of maybe locating the kitchen there with its direct access might outweigh the cons of once in a while having to kind of end run here. And we could, add a little countertop there too to, again, if it was just for coffee and donuts and that kind of function. Yeah.
I would be curious, I assume other than maybe Jim's first time staff has seen this, particularly Jim's input and Nathan's input, because you would be using that space or preparing that space in advance of activities we would have there. Your thoughts on this, to me, would be welcome as well.
And Nathan and I had talked pretty extensively about both of these spaces. So Nathan, I'll kind of take the first stab, and if I say anything wrong, go ahead and feel free to speak up. I think everybody's goal for that center counter, that area right there was considerable staff discussion right along these exact same lines, with the fact that it would best be served as a reception type area, that if you were trying to combine a reception area with a catering kitchen, things could get a little bit awkward. Talked about the plating and the service and the fact that if you have a 300-person event, none of that's probably going to serve it, and they may actually be using that small classroom space in the very back to actually do plating and serving, because they're going to, as you say, in the fog of war, they're going to come in and they're going to look for the blankest spot, because somebody may be using everything off of the administrative wing as their reception area, because it could literally be wide open for that. So the leaning was towards the idea that one of the day-to-day use of it has to be emphasized, which would be more to a counter space with the catering kitchen being kind of tucked away or hidden someplace else, and plating and serving actually maybe even being someplace else from that. If they were bringing in everything that was warm already, because a lot of times they bring it in warm and they're just ready to plate it.
And we talked in our in our last meeting, just the building committee on the previous one, about maybe this could even, if we're really trying to reduce square footage on the baseline model and keep eventual cost implications in mind, this one might, on the smaller one, it could be that it just is a deep counter. And if that's the case, that the reception and check-in could possibly happen through, you can kind of see that's maybe more of a storefront or a sliding window kind of situation. So we're trying to, again, this is a result of conversations we had with staff, trying to stay aware of scope creep, and we're really trying to avoid incrementally adding 50 square feet here, 120 there, and then when I give you a presentation and it's creeped and there's a number attached to it, you want to chase me out into the parking lot and say, how did that possibly happen? So we're just let you know that in good faith we are trying to be really efficient.
I see, it looks like there may be teeny tiny numbers up there. Do you actually have measurements for that space? How big of a space are we looking at?
This is about 45 feet.
I'm talking about like that reception/kitchen area that we've been discussing.
Oh, well, hey, I've got my computer drawing program right here open with the drawing ready to go.
I just asked because it looks like there are numbers there.
There's a square foot number. That's a square feet number. So that is, I can't believe you can't read that.
Maybe I don't want to admit I need glasses, but.
So that's the serve function there is 272 square feet. So that, if we're not talking about doing some major teaching kitchen kind of functions in there, that can come way down, and it's more of a check-in and refreshment center. For a Raymore City Hall Annex reception, do you serve, if I'm going to that reception, what am I drinking that night? This is a dry, okay. So you don't need the usual like back bar and that kind of function here, so.
We currently don't have a location that we can have a large group in very many places in town, public or private. So we don't have a lot of experience with that.
Need to get this in place before the strategic planning group.
Start tomorrow.
Brett hasn't really had a chance to talk too much about these schemes, so maybe he could just chime in, and then we can dive right back into questions about either the building or the site.
So you'll notice this more enhanced scheme, a lot more green dots, a lot more different shades of green. Backing up to that, the previous site scheme that you all seem to respond well to last time, we have this main central green, which is coming right off of this larger gathering space. And again, from what we've heard up to this point is, a place for large gatherings like weddings or, even small performances or even just casual play for the community. This all seems to have a pretty sensible interface with what's going on inside the building and what could happen outside. This central green is surrounded by and defined by trees that will have higher canopies, so you can actually look through. It's not necessarily an element that divides spaces. It's more of it provides ways to define this main central green. Again, we would like to consider landforms as part of this scheme, which again helps to give some visual interest to some of these spaces. So a landform would be simply stacking up dirt. So that's the crudest way to say it. It's a couple feet tall, maybe in these areas, so kids, you could lounge on the sides of these landforms and observe whatever, reception or event that's happening in that main green. Again, there's a trail system that connects a number of these spaces and cuts through what would be some of these landforms and more vegetated areas. And at some point we'd like to connect it to a future larger trail system that could tie into some of those program elements that you guys have talked about before, which is maybe nature trails, things like that. So there's a lot more thought into and more detail that needs to happen with this enhanced scheme, but we think there's some intriguing opportunities for different types of spaces as well as larger spaces for larger gatherings. So, these little red dots represent potential sculptural locations. Again, we're pretty intrigued with this newly formed Arts Commission and how a good way to integrate maybe sculpture from artists from Raymore or even regionally.
We would really love it, and you guys weigh in on this, but if this were considered that you've got to go see this, like people talking about it in the Crossroads or Johnson County, that you got to go see what's going on in this community, in this kind of area. And I think, yeah, question.
One of the things I think that was really good that you pointed out this time is where I think last time when people looked at the trees, they couldn't look at the top view and then imagine themselves on the ground looking through the trees. And so like the one mock-up that people didn't, of the three that had a lane of trees in the middle that I really responded to, I think people were looking at it going, well, this side's over here and this side's over here, rather than looking through a lane of trees. And so that was very good to point that out, that it's not separating these areas, that it's a view, a vista of,
Right. That
trunks and things like that.
as you would come in the front door.
That was good to point out, because it's not, I think there were times when we look at the trees, you're like, well, you can't get through that green thing.
Right.
But you can go right under that green thing. Yeah.
And as you come in the front door there, this would be a storefront window wall, so that your view would be underneath the canopy of kind of a unique experience of underneath these trees, kind of a shaded spot that I think a lot of people would be drawn to this area during warm weather when there is a lot of activity going on, kind of in benches in here looking out as your kids are running around. I don't know if Raymore has a Easter egg hunt, do they? This would be the ultimate Easter egg hunt. Headquarters. But
Actually, when we were going through this, I actually thought we were liking the opposite. And if you go back to the screen where you have the merged, if you look at we liked the bottom format. Well, that is the coming out to an opening, which leads down to the outside classroom with the trees kind of framing different segments, something similar to this. If you look at the suggestion that you have up there, you're actually kind of, the main exit is not out of the classrooms. The main exit is out of that central atrium. So you're walking people into trees. The natural instinct then is to push everybody to the sides, and you're creating division. I could see more trees on the very north end by the parking, which would then separate, which give a visual separation of the cars to the activity, and people could seek shade there. But if you're funneling people outside to an outside classroom, I'm imagining if a wedding is here, this is where the bride is walking out, but to wind her through a group of trees is not very kind to a wedding dress. And having that classroom on the south side shoves all the activity on the south side, leaving the north side barren. I'd see the central area, like with that central dot in that central third, that red dot.
Which one? This one?
In the central third. So farther, right there, that would be where the classroom would be to utilize that property better.
Those are good points. I think it's you're right there. From the previous couple options we looked at, the opening or the central green was off of the lobby space. Again, maybe thinking about the larger gatherings that are happening within the building to come out directly onto that more manicured green. That was the relationship between what's happening inside versus outside. That was our thought. And again, from an experience standpoint, to be kind of get back to some of those imperatives that Dan mentioned earlier, to bring the vegetation or tree canopies right up to the building. And so you're looking out from the lobby space through trunks and
Dappled light.
yeah, there could be some lighting opportunities, natural sunlight, things like that. That's where we tried to, I guess, merge both of those two different site options.
I kind of see what you're saying with wanting the trees to divide the area, but I also love the idea of thinking of trees not as a divider, but thinking of, like families going and having a picnic in the shade. If you go to Rec Park in the summertime, people gather under the little tiny trees by the playground there, to have a big treed area where families could gather and play and kids could, eventually climb in the trees, I think would be really quite unique because you don't find that many places. So I like the idea of having that area where it's not seeing the trees as a divider, but seeing the trees as just a different kind of space.
And we did, just to let you know, we definitely heard that comment from last time, and we felt the idea had enough merit to at least get another discussion going. And what you said is exactly what we were thinking of. We were just, as you go to the Nelson Atkins and notice where people actually hang out, it's underneath the trees watching what's going on in the middle. So we don't.
Just a reminder to use your mic, because we'll be recording this for posterity's sake on everything you say.
Do you mean to?
And holding you to it.
Just a quick summary. We definitely heard, but we were thinking of that central treat area as being kind of just a people space, kind of a connector space. And there's a site section too that kind of describes. This is a building section cut right through the central lobby. And you can just records the diagram of the idea, kind of. And when Brett was talking about the landforms, he was talking about building up that area right outside and kind of keeping that relatively flat. And then by the time you get to go back, this would be built up flat. And this is just a little bit lower. So it kind of creates a little stroll through the trees kind of thing. And there was a question at the end of the table.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for a side view there, because the downward top view, it does seem like shrub, but when you sit there and you think about that, those canopies are going to be up in the air. At least that's what I'm hearing from them, is that they want the trees that are higher up canopies so you can see through it. But that top down view it only does so good for so much, and it does kind of make you think of shrubbery and that, and real low canopies, and that is, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the plan of having something that we have to duck through and wind and weave through.
That's definitely
Mr. Mayor,
We're asking people to spend, we're going to spend $1 million on an annex to the city. We're not talking about trees.
the trees are incidental. What we need to make a decision on is the building itself. And when I look at it here, and I see the parking go all the way to the right, and yet the main entrance, and where you're going to expect the most people on A, there's no near parking on there at all. There should be parking for on the left side to meet the demand of the people coming into the building. And I can see several problems with that. And something else, when you cut off the center over there, If you've got small children or grandchildren and you've got an open building like that, they're gonna be running up and down the halls because there are no halls. The whole thing is wide open. We need to consider how we're going to control traffic in that building, and we need to consider where we're gonna put the cars so that it'll be the most convenient for the people that want to use the building. And I say we should take another look then at, what is that, B, and put some of that down there by A.
We can look at it, but again, we have parking constraints associated with being on the circle that the council themselves have put in place that does not allow for, the reason we can use Broadmoor is because it does meet with the standards that the council put in place for this particular, the design standards for the circle.
Well, maybe the council was in error and needs to rethink its position.
Yes.
I'm looking at the drawing here with the open space as it's showing with the white dot to show the center. The last wedding I was at was at Loch Lloyd. I was married at a country club, and I certainly did not want to pay for an event where I can see people's cars. I don't want, we're not going to have someone select this as a site for the memory of their lifetime where there's a bunch of cars in the background, which might be my car, which looks incredibly ugly. No one wants to see that in their pictures, and they're not going to select that. If you had that open space, you would have the wedding there, and then you would go directly into the reception from the wedding on the outside. I mean, people love to have outdoor weddings and then move them inside where things are going to be set up. I really like the mock-up here. I really don't want to see the parking moved. No one wants to see those cars when they're inside of an event.
Each one of us lives in a different type of house, and we're not going to agree on everything, because each one of us would do it differently. But we could surely come to some agreement. The thing to keep in mind is this is an annex which is supposed to improve the operation of the city of Raymore. And I don't know how many weddings we're going to have in the city of Raymore that will want to use our building. But that's not the point of the building. The point of the building is to provide storage, is to provide that for our records. It is to provide space for the park and recreation board, and it is to provide meeting space for the police department, for you, and when you're having any kind of a staff meeting, and that's what it is for. And we need to keep that in mind, and not weddings and anniversaries and we have elections about twice a year, but that's all. So the thing what we're going to do is every week is what we should keep in mind.
I think all the comments are well taken. A couple things to remember, as I've already stated myself, unless you're an architect, I think these guys can attest to that, it's tough to look at this drawing and really pick up scale and how close things are and how far things are away. I think that the parking, first of all, as Mr. Fearborn has stated, the overlay district for Municipal Circle does not allow us to put parking out where you want it, over there on the left side. That would take a major change of policy on our part, and I, to be honest, I'm not prepared to do that. I don't think Joe is either from his comments. But that parking over there, Ms. Ubach, is really not that far from the building. We're going to have handicapped and for people that have difficulty walking, it's going to be pretty close to the building. Granted, the main entrance may be right off of Municipal Circle, but there's going to be a major access point, am I correct, right there near the parking, very easily to get in. I think your fears come from a little bit of looking at this and having difficulty comprehending scale. I certainly do. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. And Joe, to your point, I think either design with the landscape, either this one, which is not my favorite. I like the one that Mr. Moorhead does as well, as I stated last time. Either one are acceptable to me. I do like the other one. To me, the other one, I apologize for being a snot, but it's a little bit better feng shui, if you will. Better use of the space, very defined. I personally like it better. I think it flows better, but this one is okay too. But I think your feeling, I think if this were built right now and I took you out there, I think my feeling, Ms. Ubach, would be that you go, this isn't as bad as I thought. It's actually quite a bit closer, and really the walk, just give me an estimate, you guys would know, what would be the walk from the far end of that to the building from your car?
From all the way
Yeah,
here?
down there. You park in that last spot. It's not that far, I don't think.
Let me check my drawing.
Okay.
While he's checking his number, we'd also remind the council that there is parking right on the circle, and there's a drop-off spot projected
front.
for right in front, right next to the front doors.
So the worst spot is about 240 feet, and the best spot's about 16 feet.
16 feet to the door.
I would point out that last time these two gentlemen were here in front of us, that comment did come up because it came from me, is that there was a lot of discussion about where handicap parking spot was be, and I brought up the point that the sidewalks took us clear out to the Circle Drive and then into the front. They have added those two sidewalks off of the driveway there, one to the side and one to the back of the facility. So, looking at the scale of the parking spots there, if I figure those parking spots are maybe 13 foot long, using my eyes here as good as they are, Meredith can tell you tonight that I can actually read that up there. It says 270. I would say probably that end spot there, which is towards the west on the north side, I would say it's probably within 24 feet of that building.
Just for scale, the 5 or 6 spots closest to the building, Ms. Ubach, are going to be the distance you're going to have to walk from your car, roughly, or from the end of this table to the end of that table. That's how close that is.
Well, I'd only like to add, and while I love discussing the placement of trees, I mean, it's fun that we're talking about this, but I will say this. The representation up here, the enhanced version, is what we asked the architect, this group to put together. And I think uniformly, while we all have different houses, we all in general like this, with a few tweaks here or there. Yes, we'd like, maybe somebody wants it painted a different color or tree different places, but this meets our representation. They've hit the objective that we asked them to do. And now I do like the larger of the two spaces on the meeting side, but and Ms. Hubach, I say this with all due respect because I respect you a lot. Hey, voting, I want to see trees when I vote. It makes me a happier voter.
I've got about 3 different comments.
Turn that mic off. Turn that mic off. Dan, if you could put up the diagram that has the red line on it that I handed out to that diagram. If you could put that up there. Do you have it?
Is this from the last?
It's from our staff.
Which?
Is this what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
that one.
Yeah. This one?
Yes.
Okay. Wait, this one?
No. The one that's in front of you. That one right there. Do you have that in your slideshow?
We don't have that in the slideshow. We've got
I-
what you
Well,
see right there.
just-
We've taken off the red line and just showed
Okay.
what.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Just a reminder to the council, what you see here replaces, this is the discussion that we were having on buying 223 behind us. We get all of the elements that we were going to have with buying it and redesigning it. It's the smaller building with minimal landscaping being done around it, and that's what you currently have the money for. When you shift to everything else, the bigger building and the nice landscaping, now we're talking about the elements that would be included in the bond issue. So you
which
have a
is-
minimum, and then you have the bond issue item, just as a reminder to the council.
This might have, now that you've taken the effort to say all that, I probably should have shown you these handy diagrams I have that. So this is what we talked about as being the baseline at 1.1, And this is what happens once you add the enhanced site work and green spaces, the additional community room for 150 more people, and then the enhanced stormwater improvements over here. And these are the same numbers from the last meeting we had, but I just wanted to include that as the slide.
But Mr. Fairborn, I do understand that the money that we have set aside would pay for the enhanced version, just minus the green space and the stormwater. If you put the base 1.1 with the 350 to 450 for the larger space, that's still well within our range before the bond.
Except that we had to pay for land and we had to pay for them, sir.
Ms. Schubach, I have about 3 things I could add to that. No, I'm kidding.
I never forget that I'm a taxpayer first before I ever became a council member. And I'm trying to save us money, and I'm trying to make the best use of the space for the money that we have. And my fist gets tight when I have to write a check of that. So
if there's nothing else, what I would propose is that we set Draw Architecture to the task of, now kind of a different phase sort of a deal, is getting to the point where we have something to show if you all decide that you're going to include the enhanced package in the bond issue, getting them to that point where we have something to show the voters relative to this is the expanded version, and at the same time working on those plans that would be associated with the site work that would have to be done no matter what, so we can continue to move forward with the project, which is specifically get us to where we can start turning some dirt on this thing even before the election. Is the council good with giving them that direction? Thank you.
All right. Is that it for us? All right.
Kitchen.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate the input, guys. Thank you very much.
All right. That takes care of the City Hall Annex discussion. Move on to the bond issue project finalization.
Thank you, sir. The next item on the council's agenda is we had passed out this particular sheet, or sent this in the agenda packet, and it was what this particular one encompasses is those items that the council had by consensus agreed to for Parks and Recreation, the road and infrastructure, and then there had been information given to the council on these last items that are here, and with that we adjourned. And so tonight we need to finalize what the council would like to see. Right now, the items that you have by consensus said include them in the bond issue come to the $6.8 million. The items that you asked for additional information on that was provided come to $2.860 million. And we estimate that those items could all be done within the existing bond issue. And then if you were to decide as a whole that this is the package you are looking at, we have some suggested ballot issue language for you to go over. But we didn't want to present that to you on the assumption, because we would be assuming what you wanted for the final items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the sheet is presented, and I like the items on here. A couple things I wanted to point out. We had a pretty good discussion, I thought, last time about the amphitheater. I thought a lot of people thought that was a good idea. One I want to bring to the forefront, because I apologize to Jeff Stevens. I did not understand the skating rink. I mean, I was an idiot on this. I'm amazed at how many people don't know this. I was one of them. I was thinking that we're going to build up curbs and put water in and freeze it. There's such a thing as faux ice, fake ice. You can lay this stuff down, you can spray it, you can skate when it's 100 degrees. Jeff, this is brilliant. I've had a lot of constituents tell me this is a fantastic idea. I definitely think we should include it, and we should give you 2 merit points for coming up with this. This is a great one. Like I said, the annex expansion project, I like that. We just finished talking about it, and I definitely think we need the signage at Hawk Ridge Park. We're going to do the additional amenities there with if we do the amphitheater and plus the other stuff that's going in. Really good build up of that park. So I'm in favor of doing the list as proposed.
Seen a bunch of thumbs up, so.
Very, very good, sir. Todd. Hi, Todd. Do you want to come sit on the end here just in case there are some questions that come up? I'm going to try to explain this. Pass those down, sir. Todd and I had Sid Douglas work on the ballot language that would be associated. The list now, as the council has by consensus approved, includes 2 different areas. One is parks and recreation. One is, in essence, roads and infrastructure. Question 1 being roads and infrastructure. Question 2 being the parks and recreation items. The annex would be considered and would be legally able to be considered a parks and recreation item. You'll notice that the ballot language begins necessarily vague. It is Sid and Todd's suggestion that you keep it to acquiring, right-of-way, constructing, etc., but then highlighting under each of the ballot issues probably your premier items that you are for sure going to want to see in there. Other items, while they would be listed as promises to the voters, obviously if something went wrong with one of the projects and we had to fulfill the promise of doing 58 Highway and one of the other items had to drop off, we'd have some explaining to do, but it wouldn't be legally mandated that we do it because it was not in the ballot language. So their recommendation is to highlight a couple of the different premier items that you think might be good selling points to everybody and put those items in. You'll also notice that the amounts that are on here are higher than the amounts that are on the sheet. That is because each of the issues does require fees to be paid. There are costs associated with floating the bonds, and Sid also recommends at any given time that we puff the numbers just a little bit that are being asked for. Again, with these numbers at the outset, we're still down to just north of $9.5 million worth of projects to float, but we can float a bond issue of this size and stay within the 7170 parameters.
Jim, I totally agree with what you've brought forth here, and I I support it. I'm just kind of curious, how much of a percentage for like contingency fees and those other things that we're talking about, that these numbers would probably be kind of fluffed and puffed?
We, each of the projects, when we're working on them at the staff level, gets a significant contingency fee assigned to it that would normally be according to APWA standards. For instance, if we're putting in a building, there between 10 and 12% for contingency on a building. If you're doing a road, it's a little bit less than that. But each of the projects has a contingency in there, and then SID also builds in a contingency over and above that on the total amount of the project that's assigned before we put it on for the bond issue. So we would be, I'm never completely comfortable, but I would say I'm Jim Fearborn comfortable with the dollar amounts that are associated with this. You may also notice just a couple of other items, nuances. Question number 2, when we get to the bottom part of it and we start talking about the annex building, calling it the City Hall Annex, we have every assumption that somewhere down the line the council is probably going to name that building something. Lee Summit started with a senior center and it ended up being named the Gamber Center. We assume you'll name it. Obviously it would be really early to be assigning a name to a building that isn't up yet. So to avoid any conflict, because for those of you who were here, you know that when we built City Hall, it was a somewhat contentious issue at the time. So we felt that perhaps for the ballot language, we would soften the fact that this is a City Hall annex and instead go with something a little bit broader in scope to try to sell more of the community on it and call it the Municipal Center Community Meeting, or call it the Municipal Circle Community Meeting Center. That might draw more votes than calling it a City Hall annex. The second item spoke with Dr. Monsies relative to their no tax increase bond issue, and he was actually talking about wanting to know what we're calling these. And I'm springing this on Todd for the first time. If they have a question 1 and we have a question 1 and then we have a question 2, do we want to be calling ours each of these issues something else? So we'll work with the school district on what they finally decide. Todd, I don't know what our flexibility is on titling the questions. Does it have to be question or proposition or bond issue?
The 2 items, either question 1, 2, 3, or proposition A, B, C. It's really, I would talk with the county and make them aware of this. Sometimes we've seen people name the propositions. Instead of A, B, C, you'd come up with some type of a name for a proposition.
Does the ordinance have to have that name?
I don't know.
Thank you.
There's going to be a filing that you'll make to the county clerk's office that will need to have that information on there.
I don't want us to get bogged down, and yes, it's that name, or it should have been somebody else's, or egos involved, anything like that. I think the first decision has to be with roads, because that's what it's all about. First, issue number 1. Issue number 2 has to do with the park inside of it, question number 2. But I do think there should be a third one, because the municipal circle should stand by itself. I don't think it should be considered in with the park there, because the park offices are going to be just such a small part of it. It is an annex. It's going to be used for that. And I don't see anything wrong with calling it an annex, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be an annex off of the city hall. It's not a part of the park department. It's not a part of public works. It's not a part of anything else. It is just Prior to City Hall. And I definitely don't want the gymnasium in there. That should be removed. I think if we're gonna talk about something, we do better with the amphitheater than we would with the gymnasium.
I don't think people are real interested on what kind of offices the city staff has to use. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude to them, but honestly, most people really don't care if they have a, 8 by 8, 10 by 10 office and 2 people are sharing that office. I mean, really, I don't know that people are going to be concerned with the school districts and how many classrooms are going to be built. They are going to want to know what kinds of things they can participate in with their tax money, what kinds of things that are going to give them more things to make their life, their pursuit of happiness that much better. I think those things are the attractive things that bring people to the polls because they say, wow, we're going to have some really great things going on. And I believe that we do have some really great things on this ballot that people will enjoy.
My biggest concern with this is just reading it, thinking from my mom brain, which most of you guys don't have. Reading it, thinking about, what's in this for me, and knowing that many of our families in Raymore are families with small children or even bigger children. Looking at this, what's in this for me? I don't see much in that for a regular family with children. And considering that we're spending $1.5 million at Hawk Ridge Park, I think that it might be beneficial to consider adding some language in there that talks about adding amenities to our parks a little more specifically. Considering the amphitheater at Hawk Ridge, considering the ADA playground at Hawk Ridge, I think those are definitely highlights, as well as the water park skating rink at, in Old Town. And in my opinion, that would be more appealing to the public than meeting space. I mean, a lot of people want meeting space, but that's not going to sell me. What's going to sell a family with children is the park amenities. That's my opinion.
I think in the survey, only 14% said that they wanted more meeting space.
Well, I was, and Sonia probably said it more personally better, but I mean, people that deal with elections and voting behavior, one of the primary things they key on is voters respond to language that touches them, and she said it exactly right. People are going to like when they look at this and go, I'll vote for it because I will use it, it affects me, I gain from it. While I don't like long blocks of language because you can get lost in the language, at the same time, adding some specificity would draw people in, especially people who would use Hawk Ridge or some of these other amenities. Making it more generic makes it more distanced, and I think people would be less apt to like it. So I'm in agreement to that with those that want to see more specificity, especially on things that would draw connectivity.
Kind of dovetail off that. Do you think should there be a third question for Hawk Ridge Park to kind of bring that language forward?
I think the more questions you have, the more chance you stand of somebody turning any one of them down. There's already going to be 3. The school districts and 2 of ours.
Just as a point, I agree with you, and I think we should probably touch up the language a bit. I think people are going to be more excited when they read that kind of stuff. However, as I try to look at both sides of the coin, I think staff's intent here, and I certainly see what they're saying, if a standard play, if you will, is under promise and over deliver. If we get into this and we get into some costs that we didn't plan for, something goes really south, all of a sudden we can't deliver on our promises. And I think that's why he probably didn't put all that in there. Maybe there's some compromise in there to kind of put a little more retail sell on it, I think is what we're looking for. But am I correct in that assessment?
Well, and especially with, obviously, I think we're all kind of focusing on question 2 here. We could definitely add Hawk Ridge Park amenities. The question becomes, how long do you want it to be? And we would caution, I specifically would caution against removing the discussion of the annex or the meeting space or whatever we want to call it, because if you focus on, we're going to put in park amenities at Hawk Ridge Park, blah, 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 and then all of a sudden we're building a building back here with the bond money that they've approved, we're going to run into the same problem we had here with City Hall. They're going to say, you didn't tell us you were building a building with this.
Mr. Mayor, if I haven't interrupted anybody, I have a question on the activity building to replace the park house, almost $3 million. What's going to be in that? We haven't talked about that building at all. We've talked about the other one down here, which is the annex expansion, but what exactly are we going to do for $3 million on the park house activity building? That's the very first thing that you had up there under Park and Recreation. And I don't remember any discussion on that, so enlighten me.
The council in fact, it was one of the first items the council approved was some sort of a multi-purpose, some call it a MAC gym, some call it a multi-purpose building with limited classroom space, small administrative space to check people in and out, for kind of a reception area. But that was one of the first items when we were talking. Back then, we were calling it a MAC gym.
I wanted to be clear about what I was saying earlier. I like the language here, and as it is, maybe adding the words Hawk Ridge Park, but I am not suggesting that it be long and detailed. I think the way it is.
How about if we start the language with talking about park and playground amphitheater amenities, and limit that wording, but talk about them so they see that first, then go into the multi-purpose building, then go into the City Hall Annex?
That sounds good.
This is new to me, so if I'm say something that we can't do, could you do like when you're talking about Hot Ridge in specific, can you put examples like use that type of wording, or does that still examples like an outdoor amphitheater, that type of wording?
I think if you're planning on doing it, go ahead and say you're planning on doing it.
Then the next question is, as we're educating the public on this, aren't we allowed then to talk about those amenities directly? So then it'd be up to us to, have the educated voter to come in knowing specifically that this means something to them. So I think that really falls on us.
Absolutely. You're making promises that you're going to do something as long as we can. And so the educational component is critical.
So I heard Mr. Moorhead talking, and it was exactly what I marked out. It seems like we spend a whole line of language saying removing the existing park house rental space at Rec Park, and I really feel like that we could take that out and just say replacing the park house facility with an activity building and gymnasium. Replacing it says we're going to remove it, but taking out that extra language. And I would recommend adding the additional amenities at other city parks at the end of it, because knowing, again, how people typically read when they're in a hurry is the first line and the last line. So I think we want to put that at the end. So finish with, and additional amenities and equipment or something like that at other city parks. I don't even think we have to mention Hawk Ridge, but I do think we need to say we're not just building 2 buildings, we're adding a lot to our park system.
Thank you. And I'm being an advocate down here. There's enough questions between me and Ms. Schubach and Mr. Stevens down here, and I think Sonia just kind of added the dovetail there and answered the question. let's get back to the perfection of the motion here. We are talking about two buildings. What we originally talked about in the beginning was the Mac Gym, which is a replacement of the Park House. Then the discussions we had earlier tonight is the annex building back here to the south of City Hall. So what we are talking about are two separate buildings. I don't want to say both buildings serve similar purposes, but they may be able to. They provide meeting areas and that. But I think it's very important that we understand and be on the same side of the coin that we are talking about two separate buildings. The one is a replacement for the Park House that it is just about expired, and the other one is our new concept of the annex. Is that correct?
I would say yes and no. I totally agree with you, because the largest chunk of this goes to those two locations. But actually, we have 4 different locations that are mentioned, because we have a small component that will finish the annex portion. And then we actually have at Hannah Station, we have a small activity and rec project there. So, I mean, you're right. The two main focuses are the two buildings and those activities. Little collateral on top of that. And I think to say that we're touching, and it's important to note, we're touching 4 distinct things in 4 distinct areas throughout the entire city, because we're not just focusing on one area. And I think voters need to know that all of their areas to some degree are being touched.
Is that clear as mud? What we will do is we'll bring this to the council with the new wording, this ordinance, next Monday night for 2 readings in December, and that puts us well on track in case something were to change or you all would have another wording change and it got completely tabled. We would still have 1 meeting in January where we could get this done and still have plenty of time to get it down to the county by the 26th.
Mr. Mayor, when are we going to discuss what the building is going to be like out on the park when you replace the Park House? And we're going to spend almost $3 million. Shouldn't we have some sort of an idea of what we're designing it for, how it's going to be laid out?
Well, you all have actually approved the architect engineering firm for that project, and they'll be coming to you soon, just the same way that Draw Architecture is coming to you for that building. Same process.
Okay, moving on.
Mr. Mayor, can I request that we swap the last 2 items on the agenda? I'm gonna have to leave at 9 o'clock, and just in case that item D is a lengthy discussion, could we discuss item E first?
And if the council would be interested, the hour does get late. We can there is no rush to bring the livable streets items before you right now. We can get that item could be completely removed from the agenda and placed on another work session agenda if it's the council's desire.
Okay, I think we'll leave it on for now, but we'll go with item E, RFQ process for city attorney and prosecuting attorney. And then go to item D.
I feel like we're being railroaded just a little bit.
Challenge one.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about it under other if we ever get there, and everybody's still awake.
While what Meredith is going to be handing out to you all is are the requests for qualification packets from each of the firms that submitted last Friday. And I am handing out just a very, very quick memo on this item. We received, thank you, Jim. What's being handed out again are the packets for city attorney and for prosecuting attorney. We received 4 submittals for city attorney from Capgay and Willarth, Gilmore and Bell, Fields and Browns, and Lauber Municipal Law. For prosecuting attorney, Mr. Marshall submitted, and Lauber Municipal Law also submitted for that one. What staff seeks at this point in time is direction from council on how you would like to proceed. There are a myriad of ways that you could proceed, but to get the conversation going, I just wanted to outline, do you all want to review each of the packets and then conduct interviews for the positions, or do you simply want to determine which group that you would like to go to in debate amongst yourselves without benefit of interview? Second item up for questioning is, if you choose to do an interview, do you want to interview all of the firms that submitted? It is a limited number of firms. If you do want to do the interviews, what would be the makeup of the interview team, and when would you like to conduct the interviews if you do so? I would recall to your memory the process that was used for the municipal judge. Even though the whole process had to be an open process, nothing could be conducted in an executive session. You first narrowed down the number through debate with the entire council. You narrowed down the number that you would be interviewing. Then you all participated in the interview process for the firms. The staff would strongly recommend that you, if you do decide to do the interview, that you all participate in the interviews and not develop a subcommittee for it. And perhaps a good number for interviewing is always 2, but when staff is doing a professional services interview process, we actually use the same process that's in place for architect, engineering firms, and surveying firms, interestingly enough, in the state of Missouri, which the first pass is you decide on the firm that you want to call in an interview. And then once you have done that, you open up the pricing packet that's associated with this, and that's actually called for in our purchasing policy for any professional services. You'll notice that the packets don't include pricing. They can't by our own code. And then once you decide who you're going to interview, a component of the interview is what they want to charge you. We think you're the best qualified firm. Let's talk about the things that are going to be associated with you doing work for us, see if we can come to agreement on that scope of services. And by the way, we don't like what you're charging us, or this looks fine. Notice I include both options. I leave it up to the council for direction.
Not because this relates to my field of employment, but I will point out, we needed some time to review for the municipal judge, and especially because these people, not so much the prosecuting attorney, but the city attorney, does touch and concern us a great deal. I'd like at least a little bit of time to kind of look through each of these. I don't think the number is so large that we should be excluding people right out of the gate. I don't think it would kill us to spend 20, 30 minutes with each firm and really blow a lot of time here, especially because of the importance that they bring to the table. I would recommend, though, before we go directly to an interview, I thought it was valuable that we did meet, discuss some parameters of what we value in a candidate, and do that discussion first before going into any interviews. I thought that was very fruitful, and I would encourage it for this. And so that's my only input.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Moorhead said it a lot better than what I could, but I think what he's saying and what I'm hearing is the process that we used for our municipal judge the last time was very helpful, very straightforward, and a good process. I think it would work very well in this instance also. I would like some time to look through this. You know, when it was handed to me, I'm like, man, I haven't got anything this large in a packet since the last TIF. A little bit of time would be helpful for me, and I think we're on a good path if we follow the procedures we did before with the municipal judge.
What we will do then is we will schedule a revisit of the packets. I was hoping to keep the 21st pretty sacrosanct for this strategic plan, so we would go with the first work session in January, and then perhaps revisit the process that you all would like to do. Just a reminder, sometime in January we would have to, at some point before the last meeting of January, finalize who you wanted for each of the positions. Would have to be done before the last regular meeting, and that would then call for an emergency read for the city attorney and the prosecutor by the end of January, and or there's always the flexibility there where we could ask whoever the existing folks were to extend their contract for a couple of weeks into February so we could get 2 regular reads.
I was just gonna say, could we put it on the agenda for the 21st, and if we go too long, then push it to the next one?
Absolutely.
Just thinking outside the box, if we could get it done that night, then let's do it, but keeping in mind that if the strategic planning takes a long time, then we'll plan to do it just in case.
Sure, I can put it on.
I think that's a great idea, because in 2 weeks, we're only reviewing 6 people here. I mean, I like the time, but I also know that I'll probably start putting together my value kind of rubric and my thoughts toward questions in an interview before I even show up to that meeting. So, I mean, I don't think we're jamming a lot in there, but I'm fearful of the emergency read idea. I think we can get this done a little quicker, even giving us some time.
Actually, only 5.
Very good.
All right, then. We'll review the packets and move from there. So that puts us back on item D, Missouri livable streets.
At the last regular meeting of the City Council on November 23rd, the City Council did table this item to a future date to allow for time to discuss it in a little bit more detail at a work session, and so here we are. And with that, I would leave it up to the council's discussion and questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'm the one that actually asked for this to be tabled for this meeting. I didn't do it as an intent to oppose this issue. I had some concerns written in here. I mean, I guess I will ask for a little consideration that I was mildly exonerated by page 14, which actually said we should not be reading it in that first read, and point out of its on its policy development, number 5, as it points out, a very long process, including public discussion. Then you vote on the resolution. But I'm of course joking there. It's a very comprehensive plan. Obviously, Mid-America Regional Council prepared this. While I'm mildly critical of some of the statements in there, obviously self-promoting themselves, really, for me, the only thing that I found applicable, and I don't want to get this into a long lecture tonight, although Mr. Carteret, I have no doubt, could lecture on this topic and be interesting the whole time. There were really actually only a couple of points in the 12 guidelines that actually I had concern about. And so if I could, before Mr. Carteret goes into anything in depth, this might shorten this a little bit. This is a guideline. This is meant to be assisting to us. I'm concerned when I believe it was not page 7, a little deeper than that. When you look at page 11 and they mention the first thing you do in the process is develop the state's transportation vision, clearly that was a Freudian slip and should have said what local, as in our city's vision, not being dictated somebody else's policy. But if you look on pages 11 through 14, one of the things they talk about in their, when they're reviewing and developing a policy, they say 4 policymakers participate. What they don't point out is they're the first policymaker, they're the second policymaker, and then we're only 25% of the decision-making of all our own rules here in Raymore, which I found the only 11 out of 1,000 cities in the state of Missouri are participating in this, and all of them are centralized under the organizations that are the metropolitan planning organizations that maintain the control under this. So there's a kind of an odd conspiracy play. I don't think Agenda 21's quite at play here, but I throw that in jokingly. But when I looked at this, I believe that this is something helpful. I love the idea of us opening ourselves up for safer pedestrian, cyclist, and motorist environment. And I know that we want to participate to a degree. So I will make the following recommendations. Under guiding principle number 1, I would remove the reference to published August 2011, because since these guidelines by their own statement in here will be amending, we should anticipate the amendment. That's more structural than substantive. And instead of being utilized, it should be considered. We should take these into consideration, not be limited and be forced to implement them. Policy number 10 mentions including an educational component to ensure all the users of the project understand and can safely utilize the project elements. First of all, whose educational program, who develops it? Obviously, it's Mid-America Regional Council. We have no input on that. Very few of their directors are actually even from this side of the state. Number 2, who implements it, at what cost? And are we in the business of telling other people that we have to educate them to do our construction projects? And do we have to pay for it? I mean, I just think that's completely unnecessary and should be deleted. On item 11, the city shall consult with neighboring cities. Well, I agree we should have some transparency. I think it should be amended to read with affected neighboring cities. If we're doing a project going between here and Peculiar, why are we notifying Grandview and Jackson County? And by this, and again, this states we have to incorporate this into all our plans, which you get into item 12. Instead of shall incorporate in the last line, it should shall consider and livable street principles when updating each plan. The idea, this plan should not circumvent nor be superior to our city's growth management plan or any of its other citizen-based plans. This is, now, to incorporate and utilize as a benefit, absolutely, but I think the superior-inferior role should be flipped there. Those are my recommendations. I value Mr. Cataret's input on all of this. Again, I had no major agenda with this. I like the general idea of it, but I just think that somebody got a little excited down at Mark and put together a great plan, but slightly intrusive and too comprehensive.
Thank you for your comments. I was told to be very, very brief, so I don't have a lot to add to that. Nor do I want to go down that path.
Well done, Jim. Thank you. I think we all understand what the policy, what the intent is. We've tried to get the city, whether it's staff, the planning commission, or council, to think about when we approve a new street or a reconstruction of a street like we did with Lucy Webb under the previous bond issue, or even if we repave a street and we have to restripe it, just to be thinking about making that street or combining elements of that street to make it livable. It might mean just thinking about if we add a path to that street. Every street's not going to be livable, but there could be elements that could be added to each street project or a street project that helps it be more livable, that we consider bicyclists in this
on this particular road project, or we consider pedestrians, on this project. That's the real intent of the policy, is just to make a statement that we are considering all users of our street network when we consider new projects. And that's what is asked for when we are looking at adopting this policy. It is important for us to have a policy in place. It's something that's looked at, as we talk about our community for all ages and our walk-friendly community designations, they want you to have a complete streets, livable streets policy. And certainly if we talk about grant opportunities for road projects, it's a key component of any application that we make, that we have a policy in place. So that's the real purpose, the impetus behind us pushing this, forward for your consideration. So I'll leave it at that.
What are we going to get out of this we don't already know ourselves? I mean, it just seems like the problem. We're getting something for nothing, but I don't think that's what we're getting. I mean, there's always something attached to that. What is it that we're going to have to do if we pass all this? There's a cost to it somewhere.
Well, I think it goes, from staff's standpoint, it goes no further than what Mr. Catared just now said. It is another tool in the toolbox. Would we consult it? Yes. Would we follow it? Not always. If they've got a good idea that we can use, then we would utilize it. Our primary impetus for this begins and ends with, when we are applying for grants, we want to be able to say that we have this policy in place, and to the degree that it fits right for us, we might use some of the elements that we see in there, only from the standpoint of they're there.
Long-term thinking, is this going to morph into something else? Do you see that in terms of something that you're going to have to do later down the line to keep getting the grants? I mean, it's kind of what I call a nudge.
I think I'm going to dovetail off that, and I hear Mr. Stevens' sentiment, and I know him well enough to think that I know what he's talking about there and I understand it. It's kind of the unintended consequences of what we do here. I think there's a lot of good ideas in there. I've read through them, but those are all ideas and things that other cities are doing that I don't believe will preclude us from doing if we want to do it on our own. Going into a policy that, doesn't intend to tie our hands in the future, but, causes enough concern tonight for me that it possibly could. I really am opposed to that. I just, and this is a huge kudos to staff, because they've proven over the years that I've been on the council that they think and they do as the trends are lining up and coming forth. And there's nothing stopping staff from doing that. And I don't think the staff will be stopped or hindered in the future of being able to emulate other cities where good things have been proposed. Like just in today's paper, I'm reading in today's paper, the green spaces there to give bicycles a head start. Okay, those there are things that we can do, and those there are things that would be implemented by that policy in here too. But for us to tie our hands so we could participate in that, I think that's kind of misleading. We could still do that, but get back to what Mr. Stevens is saying. What is this going to cost us in the long run? Is it going to be one of those things that it turns into, of course, this here's going to sound like conspiracy theory also, is that, you get into the point where like you have federal mandates, or federal funding, and then the federal government says, well, we don't like what you're doing there in Raymore. If you don't do this, you're going to lose your grant money for your drunk driving stuff, or for this and that. That's what really concerns me. I understand that, you know, it is a very good selling point for getting grants in that. But boy, I have some concerns about it.
I have a question for Mr. Carteret. The changes proposed by Councilmember Moorhead, are those suitable to you, and do you believe those would be suitable to the Mid-America Regional Council for purposes of this policy?
Absolutely.
Given that, and I think that's reasonable, I really like Derek's idea of the change of the superiority, superior-inferior switch. Thing to remember is grants coming through, funneled through MARC, are different than monies coming from the federal government, say, to direct highway transportation programs, or one you're probably more familiar with is the school district. We'll give you money, but you're going to have to put out the federally approved snack list. Your kid can't bring a Snickers to school. They can do that, but you don't get to keep our money. MARC's is more, we want you to consider these things. You should consider these items in doing your projects. And they have always, pretty much always operated that way. Is that would you say that's a correct statement, sir?
Yeah, correct statement. The one thing that we're looking at through the MARC is having the policy is something that a city like Raymore needs. We already start low on the scale of scoring for certain, grant projects. We've got to find a way to score better.
Right.
A quick way is having a livable streets policy. Most of the communities that we would directly be competing against here in the south end of the metro region have a policy in place. They already have a step ahead of us.
I already have that. And so basically all we're doing with this, with adopting this, is just saying that we will consider these things. It doesn't hold us to anything. And I've never known the federal government to be retroactive on something. In fact, I think that's probably illegal for them to go back and go, you can't have your DWI grant unless you do this. Now, like I said, they do that with other things, as I gave you the example of. But this is just a fairly generic, I think these are things that the Planning and Zoning Commission somewhat takes into consideration anyhow. Now, this is just a little bit more of a refining document as to say we should look at these within reason, and we have lots of outs. If it's not a deal where Mark's going to say, well, you've got to build an 8-foot bike lane to go with that, or we're not, you can't do that. You're not going to get this grant. It's something we have to consider. Staff has put several stopgap measures in there, such as things as we have to consider budget, we have to consider cost, we have to consider usage of that. One that comes to mind right now really has nothing to do with us, but you'll notice that Walmart has put in the new parking stalls for EV vehicles. I've yet to see an EV vehicle parked in one. Now, I'm sure they're planning for the future, but as far as a city project would go right now, we're probably not going to do that simply because there aren't that many electric vehicles in town. Maybe 2 years from now there are, and we need that kind of thing. But I think what we've put together, especially with the changes proposed by Councilmember Moorhead, I think this is something we could live with. And remember, we always, as the people and the representative of the people, always have the voice here. If they get pushy, we can always revoke this. It's not concrete, can't be removed. I think it just positions us better for future grant opportunities with Mark, and it's some stuff that we're already doing now. I think I can certainly see where the concerns came from. I think with the proposed changes, I think we're at a policy I think we can all live with.
As a person that jumped in with, of course, an extensive list of all these little adjustments, which looks like I'm a lot more anal retentive than I really am about it, I am actually very supportive of the general concept of this, and I'm not suspicious of Mark or anything like that. But as a person who now is playing a larger role in the management of grants at a larger governmental level in this county, I'm actually seeing, with the new Omni circular, oh yes, matter of fact, if there's a shall in the document and you don't do the shall, they don't just penalize you, they come take that cash back. So, that's why you have to be careful when you look at these contracts. That's why some of the language in here is preserving the inherent language of the policy itself. Moving a few shalls to consider or things like that is slightly protective of us of those unintended consequences while still maintaining the value of the policy itself. And so I am not asking for any real substantive change with the exclusion of the educational component, which is not material, but it is substantive. The rest of it's just some slight language adjustment. Still meeting our goal, still getting the objective, and protecting us on the rare instance of a grant. So
Thank you. I agree with you, Derek. I think the language that you changed, I think, kind of cleaned it up. But I also think this section, or number 5, when you read that, that gives us an out in every cost budget, the whole thing right there. So I trust staff. If staff thinks this is something that we need and it's a benefit to the city, and I see, then number 5 makes me real comfortable, and your wording changes, if we agree to that, then I support it.
I was very much in favor of it. When I looked at the resolution and all the whereases, I didn't see anything that I couldn't live with. We want to be a livable community. We want to depend on something more than just a car. We want to have bikes. We want to be able to walk. I couldn't see there was nothing in here that said we had to take 58 Highway and make certain changes. But we've got a policy in place so that if anybody comes, the federal or the state or even locally, we can say, yes, we've got a policy, here's what it is. Does this fall in line with it? Can we live with it? The budget and the different things. I think we ought to go ahead and pass it with the changes as soon as possible and get it out of the way and go ahead and, because like you're saying, if we're going to be restriping 58, there's a lot of things we might want to do there that we're already going to have to stripe it, so we may want to restripe it to our specifications. But there's nothing says we have to. So I'm in favor of bringing it forward with your revisions and going ahead with it.
Very good. Staff will put this on for December 14th with the changes recommended by Councilmember Moorhead. If it's of any comfort at all, just add one thing to that. If it's any comfort at all, a policy TUMS, if you will, one of the largest debates the council ever engaged in was whether or not to join the MARC Solid Waste Management District, and that was in the late 90s, and they had a ton of numbers associated with that I know, looking at the debate that went on, everybody was worried about, oh my gosh, we're going to end up going with tagging our trash, and we're going to have 90% recycling by such and such a date, and those, while they've been suggestions of MARC, have never come to fruition, and we've actually gotten quite a bit out of them from that particular program. We've had 2 grants awarded to us. We've had, obviously, the Household Hazardous Waste program that we're able to participate in each year. So that has actually been a pretty good payback to us without them putting anything onerous on to us. As far as being cautious of MARC, I can guarantee that every person on staff who's sitting in this room is cautious of MARC as well. We worry about the exact same things. We sure do.
Okay. Any other discussion on the livable streets? If not, we'll move on to other.
I do have an item under other, unless Mr. Feuerborn had something else.
What is your item?
I want to propose to the council, and I'm going to pass out some props here. My thanks to Kevin Kellogg provided me with a couple of these, so I'll give you different ones than the one you gave me. And I need these. By the way, I have to ship these back, so please don't slip these in your pocket. You can. Yeah. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. I'll start 3 that way. At that end, just pass them around.
I'm a little suspicious of Councilman Holman handing me something and I have to pay back.
There's 7. 2 of them are Kevin's. He'll beat me if I don't get one.
Yeah, I will hunt you down.
Just a real quick history on the challenge coin, and probably even a bigger expert than I would be. Chief Turnbow over here, I'm sure he's got a collection at home, as most police officers do, especially chiefs of police. The challenge coin actually, as far as historians can tell, date back to the days of the Roman Empire. Back then, what we think of as medals, the Romans were big on striking coins, and they would provide those to the soldiers as a reward for doing something good. We good? Sure.
And they would exchange those and show those to each other. The more modern of the stories, I can't prove it, but during World War I, when air power first came into existence, a lot of the squadron commanders for the Army Air Forces were wealthy college students. Families were well off from Harvard, Yale, and the Ivy League colleges. There's a story of a particular squadron commander in World War I who ordered coins be struck that he paid for out of his own pocket and gave to members of his squadron as a means of esprit de corps, a way to show identification to the squadron. As the story goes, one of his pilots was shot down behind enemy lines in Germany. He was actually able to escape, and the only item that wasn't taken from him during capture was his challenge coin, which he carried around his neck in a leather pouch. They allowed him to keep that. When he escaped, he had no identification. He was dressed as a local. He made his way back to France. The French citizens captured him, believing him to be a German spy, and were about to execute him. The only way he was able to prove his identification was through the challenge coin around his neck, which allowed him enough time. They gave him enough time to actually get in contact with his squadron, and he could prove who he was. They're very, very popular among the military, among police, fire, and even cities nowadays. They really bring a connection of a person to the entity. If you're a member of a police department or a particular military unit and you have one of those coins, it's a really strong bond and really strong connection with that entity that you're with. You'll trade those. You'll have extra ones. You'll trade or give as gifts. It would be customary for Chief Turnbow, when he was chief here, to if he had a challenge coin, to take it to another agency. They had a meeting, and he might exchange that with the other CEO or the other chief of police. There's also the one that a lot of people like, where you have a challenge coin. We go to the bar. I take my coin out. I call for the challenge. Anybody who doesn't produce their coin has to buy the first round of drinks. If everybody produces their coin, then I have to buy the round of drinks. But for a small inanimate object, they really bring out the best in people. And I could get a lot of people, I think, testify to that. Some of you have some connection with this. I know Jeff does down there. Kevin obviously does, loaning them to me. What I am proposing is that would you mind handing me the flyers there, Derek? Is that we do a city challenge coin. Initially, I wanted to do it right away and have them distributed, but with the upcoming election, I talked to Jim about this. We would have to wait until after April, after the election, because those of us that would be candidates would be prohibited basically from giving those out. But I think if we authorize this challenge coin, and I designed one, I'm going to pass these around. 4, 5. Yeah, if you would, please. This is one that I designed, just the basics of it. It's going to be the city logo on one side. The opposite side is going to have a 3D raised image of City Hall. There is a Latin inscription at the bottom that I found. It's a known Latin inscription. Urbum latericium invenit marmoream reliquit. Okay, teach? Not bad. Translated, it means they found a city of bricks and they left it a city of marble. My interpretation of that is we had and found a solid city, but we left it better than it was when we came here. When each of us came onto the council, we did everything we could in our power to make this a better city before we left. Mrs. Schubach, you are the matriarch of history of this city. No question about that whatsoever. This item, if we purchase these, will become a piece of history. These will be very important, and every time a city council member or a staff member or anyone passes these items to someone, they have a connection to the city that they didn't have before. If you think about it, many of our residents' only connection to the city is the time they got a traffic ticket or when they came up here to pay their water bill. Now they'll have a personal, hard material connection to the city that they can be proud of. I can tell you that anybody that's ever gotten one just loves them. They're a shiny bauble, but they mean a lot. I would propose, if there's consensus, that we allow Mr. Fearborn to enter in negotiations with Symbol Arts. By the way, they come in the little plastic pouches if we order from them that you saw, which is nice. It keeps them free of the fingerprints and that kind of thing. And you can carry them easily in your pocket without losing them. That we enter or allow Mr. Fearborn to enter into negotiations with Symbol Arts to purchase 1,000 of these. And it sounds like a lot, but there are 8 of us on City Council, plus the mayor, plus staff. You know, gave out 50 apiece. That's what we're going to need for the first round. Something to remember, if we order these, the first 150 will not leave this building. They will go into the pockets of every individual. The first one I give to Derek Moorhead is going to stay with Derek Moorhead. He's not going to give all his away. He's going to want one, and I can tell you his father's going to want one. Mr. Fuhrborn is going to want one. Nathan is going to want one. Mr. Crass is going to want one. So the first 150 are going to go to staff and all the boards here in the city. Am I wrong, Chris? After that, then we get to distribution. So that's, like I said, I think we should order 1,000. Pardon?
What's the cost per coin?
These, right now, the cost they gave us on these was about $6 and, was it 53 cents, Jim, per piece?
Roughly $6.50.
Yeah.
That's before negotiations.
Right.
I would intend to because again, they're just, I would intend to do what we do here.
Yeah, like I said, I would like to authorize Mr. Fuhrborn to enter into negotiations to order these. We'll get them, we get to look at them, and he'll keep them boxed up until after April, at which point he can disperse them and we can use them during the time of our building projects if that GO bond passes, and I believe that it will, to make people feel better about who they are and who this city is. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, to comment on that, I do want to point out this is, while this is very unique, it's not that rare. I mean, I'll point out several members here are members of the Optimist Club, and I think we get scolded if we don't have our little pin on, although I need to go more when you show up. And then the other thing, like, for example, as a member of the Lions Club, that it's actually a part of the tradition of the Lions when you gain patches to trade patches, and it's meant to create a community.
Absolutely.
So it's not just law enforcement, it's not just cities. Other organizations do this as well, and it has the exact same kind of to common principle to draw people together. So I'm very supportive of the idea.
Just to add another story, locally, Troop 32 ordered these for the troop, and then they also ordered a second grouping for to give to they ordered them for parents to purchase for their boys, but they also ordered them for the Eagle Scouts, where it has one side has the troop logo and the other side has the eagle, and it's truly something that is an honored thing to have, and it is a challenge that has brought up people say, all right, pull out your Eagles, all the guys coming up. And it really inspires the leadership, and I think it's an awesome idea.
Just one other housekeeping point. They said turnaround time on these is about 7 weeks. So if we authorized Mr. Fuhrborn tonight upon negotiations, we'd probably be looking at February before he would get these in. So they really wouldn't be under lock and key very long. And they would be ready after the election to distribute to you, to staff, to give away, and basically showcase our city.
Okay. We have consensus?
I say yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
Magnets? I carry a billfold and a checkbook, and that's all I carry in my purse.
We'll exclude you from buying the drinks. That's okay.
it appears you have consensus, sir.
But I'm just saying it's one of the things that I probably would not do because I try to make things as light in my life as possible.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead, Mr. Davis. I was just going to say, do we have any other items on the agenda? Oh, please.
I wanted to ask about the second building that we're looking at for the center over here. I didn't ever remember that we had decided on a building. In fact, I liked the second one, and I thought a couple of you did as well. So I'm wondering, do you want to see the layout in the second building, or are you happy with what they've produced?
I'm never afraid to look at alternatives or any of those, absolutely. I thought tonight we were just getting a general concept. That's why, no pun intended, I wasn't arguing about the forest for the trees. Sorry.
You're talking about that square one, the squared one? Sure. Sure. Does the council?
Do we have, I just have the question, so is there consensus then? to
Yes.
Go ahead, thank you.
Yes. Is there any other items for this evening? All right. We have a motion to adjourn?
I don't think we need one. We're in work session.
Okay.
Do we have any reason to go into executive?
I'm aware of.
Okay.
You're in adjournment.